The morning sun cast long shadows across the ancient stones of Windsor Castle, as Catherine, Princess of Wales, stood before her bedroom window. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the official letter that had arrived just hours before. The words seemed to blur together, but their meaning was crystal clear. Prince William would be leaving for a 6-month humanitarian mission to remote regions of Africa, departing in just 3 days. Catherine had always known this day would come. William's passion for conservation and helping those in need had been one of the things that drew her to him all those years ago when they were just university students. But knowing something and living it were two completely different things. The thought of being apart for such a long time filled her with a mixture of pride and deep concern. She walked slowly down the corridors of their private quarters, her footsteps echoing softly on the polished floors. The walls were lined with portraits of generations of royals who had faced their own separations and challenges. Each painting seemed to watch her with understanding eyes, as if they too had experienced the weight of duty pulling their loved ones away. In the nursery, their 3 children were still sleeping peacefully. Prince George lay sprawled across his bed, his dark hair tousled from sleep. Princess Charlotte had somehow managed to kick off all her blankets while little Prince Louis clutched his favorite stuffed animal tightly. Catherine stood in the doorway, watching them breathe steadily, knowing that in a few short days, they would be asking where their father had gone. The morning routine began as it always did, but everything felt different. William appeared at breakfast looking tired, his usual bright smile replaced by a more subdued expression. He had spent most of the night in his study, reviewing maps and mission details. The children chatted excitedly about their upcoming school events, completely unaware of the change that was about to reshape their lives temporarily. Catherine poured William's coffee, their fingers brushing briefly as she handed him the cup. In that simple touch, years of love and understanding passed between them. They had weathered many storms together, from the intense media scrutiny of their early relationship to the overwhelming responsibilities that came with their royal duties. But this felt different, more personal somehow. As the children finished their breakfast and hurried off to get ready for school, William and Catherine found themselves alone in the morning light streaming through the windows. The silence between them was filled with all the words they hadn't yet said, all the fears they hadn't yet voiced, and all the love that made this upcoming separation so difficult. William reached across the table and took Catherine's hand in his. His thumb traced gentle circles on her palm, a gesture he had done countless times before when words seemed inadequate. They both knew that his work with various charitable organizations had always been important to him, but this mission was different. He would be traveling to areas where communication would be limited, where the basic amenities they took for granted simply didn't exist. The weight of their responsibilities pressed down on them both. Catherine would need to manage not only her own royal duties, but also help the children understand and cope with their father's absence. William carried the burden of leaving his family while knowing that his work could potentially help thousands of people who desperately needed assistance. Throughout the day, palace staff moved quietly around them, preparing for William's departure with the efficiency that came from years of experience. Suitcases were packed with practical clothing suitable for the African climate. Medical supplies and communication equipment were carefully organized. Security protocols were reviewed and finalized. Catherine found herself memorizing small details about William throughout the day. The way he hummed softly while reading his morning briefings. How he always checked his watch twice when he was thinking deeply about something. The gentle way he spoke to their staff, always treating everyone with respect and kindness regardless of their position. As evening approached, they walked together through the castle gardens. The autumn air was crisp, and leaves crunched softly under their feet. They had walked this same path hundreds of times before, but tonight it felt like they were seeing everything for the first time. Each bench, each flower bed, each ancient tree seemed to hold special meaning. William stopped beside the rose garden that had been planted to commemorate their wedding. The roses were past their peak bloom, but a few hardy flowers still clung to their stems, defying the approaching winter. He picked one of the remaining roses and handed it to Catherine, just as he had done on their wedding day when they walked through these same gardens as newlyweds. They sat together on their favorite bench, the one that offered a perfect view of the grounds and the countryside beyond. In the distance, they could see the lights of the village beginning to twinkle as darkness fell. This view had always brought them peace, reminding them of the world beyond the palace walls, the world they had sworn to serve. Catherine leaned against William's shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing. They talked quietly about practical matters, about schedules and responsibilities. But underneath the practical conversation was an emotional undercurrent that neither wanted to fully acknowledge yet. The reality of separation was settling in, making everything feel more precious and fragile. As they made their way back to the castle, hand in hand, both were lost in their own thoughts. William was thinking about the villages he would visit, the people he would meet, and the projects he hoped to implement. Catherine was thinking about the empty space at the breakfast table, the bedtime stories she would read alone, and the daily challenges she would face without her closest confidant and partner. The evening routine continued as normal, but both of them moved a little slower, spoke a little softer, and held each other a little longer. They were already beginning to store up memories to sustain them through the months ahead, each moment becoming more precious because they knew how numbered these final days together would be. The second day brought a flurry of activity that neither William nor Catherine had fully anticipated. Word of the prince's upcoming mission had begun to spread through official channels, and suddenly their private family moment was becoming a matter of public interest. Phone calls from government officials, charity representatives, and media coordinators filled William's schedule from early morning until late evening. Catherine watched from the sidelines as William transformed into his public role, the one that required him to be confident, articulate, and completely focused on the mission ahead. She had seen this transformation countless times before, but today it felt like watching him slip away from her bit by bit. Each official meeting, each briefing, each strategic discussion pulled him further into the world that would soon take him thousands of miles away. The children sensed that something important was happening, even though William and Catherine had not yet told them about the upcoming separation. Prince George kept asking why there were so many serious-looking people in suits walking through their home. Princess Charlotte noticed that her parents seemed distracted during their usual evening playtime. Little Prince Louis simply clung more tightly to both his parents, his child's intuition picking up on the emotional undercurrents he couldn't understand. During a brief break between meetings, William found Catherine in the library where she often went when she needed to think. She was sitting in the window seat, a book unopened in her lap, staring out at the grounds where gardeners were preparing the flower beds for winter. The sight of her there, looking so contemplative and beautiful in the afternoon light, made his heart ache with the knowledge of their approaching separation. He sat beside her, and without words, she shifted to make room for him in the narrow window seat. They sat pressed together, watching the gardeners work with the kind of quiet efficiency that came from years of tending the same land. There was something comforting about the continuity of it, the way some things remained constant even when everything else was about to change. Catherine finally spoke, her voice soft but steady. She told William about her fears, not just about missing him, but about the weight of representing both of them during his absence. She would need to attend events alone, make decisions that they would normally discuss together, and present a strong front for their children even when she felt uncertain or overwhelmed. William listened carefully, understanding that she wasn't asking him to change his plans or seeking reassurance that everything would be fine. She was sharing her truth with him, the way they had always shared their deepest thoughts and concerns. He admired her honesty and her strength, qualities that had made her not just a wonderful wife but an exceptional partner in their royal duties. He shared his own concerns about the mission, details that wouldn't appear in any official briefing. The remote areas he would be visiting had limited infrastructure and unpredictable conditions. Communication with home would be sporadic at best. He would be working with local communities to establish sustainable projects, but success wasn't guaranteed, and the work would be physically and emotionally demanding. As evening approached, they made the decision to tell the children about William's upcoming departure. They gathered in the family sitting room, a cozy space filled with photographs and personal mementos that made it feel like home rather than a royal residence. The children settled around them with the easy comfort of family routine. William began by explaining that his work sometimes required him to travel to places where people needed help. He used simple words and familiar concepts, comparing his mission to the charity work they had all participated in together. The children listened with the serious attention they gave to important family discussions, Prince George being the eldest, was the first to understand the implications. His face showed a mixture of pride in his father's work and concern about the separation. He asked practical questions about how long William would be gone and whether they would be able to talk to him while he was away. His maturity and thoughtfulness reminded both parents of themselves at that age, carrying responsibilities beyond their years. Princess Charlotte's reaction was more emotional. She climbed into William's lap and wrapped her arms around his neck, asking if she could go with him to help the people who needed assistance. Her generous heart and desire to help showed the same compassionate spirit that drove William's own charitable work. Little Prince Louis didn't fully grasp the concept of months or distance, but he understood that his father would be going away. He became clingy and quiet, sensing the sadness in the room even if he couldn't articulate what it meant. William and Catherine spent extra time that evening with bedtime routines, reading additional stories and answering questions that ranged from practical to profound. Each child processed the information differently, but all of them needed extra reassurance and comfort. After the children were finally asleep, William and Catherine found themselves walking through the castle again, this time visiting rooms that held special memories. They stopped in the music room where Catherine had played piano during their engagement. They paused in the portrait gallery, where their own wedding photograph hung among generations of royal couples. In William's study, they looked at maps of Africa, and he showed her the regions where he would be working. The distances seemed impossibly vast, the locations impossibly remote. Catherine traced the routes with her finger, trying to imagine the landscape and the people he would meet. They talked about communication plans and emergency protocols, the practical details that would keep them connected across continents. But they also talked about smaller things, the daily routines and family traditions they wanted to maintain even while apart. As the second day drew to a close, both William and Catherine felt the weight of time moving too quickly. Tomorrow would bring even more preparations, more meetings, more reality crashing in on their remaining private moments. They held each other closer that night, storing up the warmth and comfort they would need to sustain them through the long separation ahead. The house felt different now that the children knew about William's departure. There was a subtle shift in the family dynamic, a new awareness that made every interaction feel more significant. Each meal, each conversation, each shared laugh carried additional weight because everyone knew how precious these final moments together truly were. The final day arrived with an urgency that caught everyone off guard. Despite all their preparations, despite knowing this moment was coming, the reality of William's departure felt sudden and overwhelming. The morning began earlier than usual, with final security briefings and last-minute equipment checks creating a sense of controlled chaos throughout the castle. Catherine woke before dawn, unable to sleep through the noise of activity in the corridors outside their bedroom. She lay quietly for a few minutes, listening to William's steady breathing beside her, trying to memorize the sound. Soon she would be waking up alone, and the thought made her pull the blankets closer around herself. When William stirred awake, they shared a quiet moment in the early morning darkness. No words were necessary. They both understood that this was their last morning together for many months. They moved through their morning routine slowly, each task taking on special significance. Catherine made William's coffee exactly the way he liked it, with just a splash of cream. William helped her choose her jewelry for the day, a tradition they had maintained since their early married years. The children were unusually subdued at breakfast, picking at their food and speaking in hushed tones. They had all dressed carefully for the day, understanding instinctively that this was an important occasion that required their best behavior. Prince George wore his favorite blue sweater, the one that matched his father's eyes. Princess Charlotte had chosen her most grown-up dress, wanting to look mature and strong for the farewell. William knelt down to speak with each child individually before they left for school. With Prince George, he had a quiet conversation about responsibility and looking after his mother and siblings. The young prince nodded seriously, his small shoulders straightening as he accepted this important role. Princess Charlotte received a special locket that had belonged to William's mother, Princess Diana. William explained that it was something to remember him by and to remind her that love travels any distance. Charlotte held the locket carefully in her small hands, understanding that she was receiving something precious. Little Prince Louis got extra hugs and kisses, along with a promise that his father would bring back something special just for him. William recorded a short video message on Catherine's phone, something Louis could watch whenever he missed his father too much. As the children left for school, each goodbye felt final and significant. William stood at the door long after their car had disappeared from view, storing up the memory of their small faces pressed against the windows, waving until they could no longer see him. The rest of the morning was consumed with final preparations. William's luggage was loaded into vehicles, documents were reviewed one last time, and security teams conducted their final briefings. Catherine moved through these activities with practiced grace, but those who knew her well could see the effort it required to maintain her composure. The departure was scheduled for early afternoon, allowing time for a private family lunch before William had to leave for the airport. They ate in the small dining room they reserved for intimate family meals, surrounded by photographs and personal touches that made the space feel warm and lived in. Conversation during lunch was carefully normal, focusing on everyday topics and gentle humor rather than the elephant in the room. They talked about the children's upcoming school projects, Catherine's scheduled appearances for the following week, and mutual friends they hadn't seen in a while. It was their way of maintaining normalcy in a situation that felt anything but normal. As the meal drew to a close, the sound of vehicles arriving in the courtyard outside signaled that the time for departure had come. William's security team and mission coordinators were ready to escort him to the airport, where a military transport plane waited to begin his journey to Africa. The family moved to the private courtyard where they had said goodbye countless times before, but never for such an extended period. Palace staff lined up respectfully to bid farewell to the prince, many of them showing genuine emotion at his departure. William had always treated the staff with kindness and respect, and their affection for him was evident in their faces. Catherine helped William with his final preparations, straightening his jacket and checking that he had all his essential documents. Her hands were steady, but William could see the emotion she was working to contain. They had agreed to keep the farewell positive and strong, especially with photographers positioned at a respectful distance to document this historic moment. When the time came for their final goodbye, William and Catherine stepped slightly apart from the gathered crowd. They stood facing each other in the courtyard, where they had shared so many moments over the years, from casual conversations to formal ceremonies. William took Catherine's hands in his, looking directly into her eyes with all the love and admiration he felt for her. He spoke quietly, words meant only for her ears, telling her how proud he was of her strength and how much her support meant to him. He reminded her that they were partners in everything, even when separated by distance. Catherine responded with her own quiet words of love and encouragement. She told him how proud she was of the work he was going to do, and how much she believed in his ability to make a real difference in the lives of the people he would meet. She promised to keep their family strong and united until his return. Then came the embrace that would be photographed and remembered around the world. It wasn't a brief, formal hug appropriate for public viewing. Instead, it was a genuine, heartfelt embrace between two people who loved each other deeply and were facing a significant separation. William wrapped his arms around Catherine, holding her close against his chest. Catherine's arms went around his shoulders, and for a long moment, they simply held each other in the afternoon sunlight. The embrace conveyed everything words couldn't express, all their love, their fears, their hopes, and their absolute commitment to each other and their family. When they finally separated, both had tears in their eyes, but their faces showed strength and determination rather than despair. They exchanged one final kiss, tender and full of promise, before William stepped back and prepared to leave. The image of that final embrace, captured by photographers and broadcast around the world, would become iconic. It showed a couple facing separation with grace and dignity, supporting each other even in difficulty, and demonstrating the kind of love that transcends distance and time. The silence that followed William's departure was unlike anything Catherine had ever experienced. Even with the usual activity of palace life continuing around her, even with staff members going about their daily duties, there was an emptiness that seemed to echo through every room. She stood in the courtyard long after the convoy of vehicles had disappeared through the gates, long after the sound of engines had faded into the distance. The first few hours were the hardest. Catherine found herself automatically setting 2 place settings for dinner, before remembering that William wouldn't be there. She caught herself listening for his footsteps in the corridor outside their bedroom. Every familiar sound seemed to remind her of his absence rather than providing comfort. When the children returned from school that afternoon, the reality of their father's departure hit them with full force. The house felt different to them too, quieter and somehow larger without William's presence. Prince George tried to be brave, asking practical questions about when they might hear from their father and whether he had arrived safely at his destination. Princess Charlotte was less successful at hiding her emotions. She cried openly, not the dramatic tears of a child's tantrum, but the genuine grief of someone who deeply missed a person they loved. Catherine held her daughter close, offering comfort while dealing with her own similar feelings. Little Prince Louis wandered around the house looking for his father, checking all of William's usual spots before finally accepting that he was truly gone. He became clingy with Catherine, following her from room to room and asking repeatedly when his father would come home. The evening routine felt strange and incomplete without William's participation. Catherine read bedtime stories alone, handled bath time by herself, and tucked each child into bed with extra care and attention. She found herself staying longer in each bedroom, providing additional comfort and reassurance. After the children were finally asleep, Catherine walked through the quiet house, visiting the places where she and William spent their private time together. His study still smelled faintly of his cologne and the leather of his favorite chair. His side of their bedroom looked neat and empty, his pillow still holding the slight indentation from his last night's sleep. The first week passed in a blur of adjustment and routine building. Catherine threw herself into her royal duties with renewed energy, attending charity events and official functions with the kind of grace and dedication that made her beloved by the public. But those who knew her well could see the extra effort it required, the way she had to work harder to maintain her usual warmth and engagement. Messages from William were sporadic and brief, limited by the communication challenges of his remote location. When they did manage to connect, the phone calls were precious but also difficult. The time difference meant that when Catherine was free to talk, William was often in the middle of important work, and vice versa. During one particularly clear connection, William described the village where he was currently staying. He painted pictures with his words of red earth paths, children playing with homemade toys, and families who welcomed him with incredible warmth despite having so little material wealth. His voice carried excitement about the projects they were implementing, but Catherine could also hear the fatigue and the strain of being so far from home. Catherine shared news from their own life, carefully chosen stories that would lift William's spirits without making him feel guilty about missing daily moments with his family. She told him about Prince George's excellent marks on a recent test, Princess Charlotte's success in her school play, and little Prince Louis's new words and achievements. But the conversations also revealed the growing challenges of separation. William missed bedtime stories and morning conversations with the children. Catherine was handling discipline issues and important decisions alone, always wondering what William would do in the same situation. They were both strong individuals, but they had grown accustomed to facing challenges as a team. The public response to their farewell embrace had been overwhelming and largely positive. Newspapers and magazines around the world had featured the photograph on their front pages, with headlines praising the couple's obvious love and dedication to each other. Social media was filled with supportive messages from people who were moved by the genuine emotion they had witnessed. Many people shared their own stories of separation from loved ones, whether due to military service, work obligations, or other circumstances. The royal couple's experience had resonated with families around the world who understood the difficulty of maintaining relationships across distance and time. Catherine began receiving letters from people who had been inspired by her strength and grace during the farewell. Some were from military spouses who understood the challenges of long separations. Others were from people facing their own difficult goodbyes who found courage in her example. One letter particularly touched her heart. It was from an elderly woman whose husband had served in distant posts throughout their marriage. She wrote about the importance of focusing on the love that connected them, rather than the distance that separated them. She shared practical advice about maintaining connection and emotional support that Catherine found both comforting and useful. As the weeks turned into months, Catherine developed new routines and found unexpected sources of strength. She discovered that she was more capable of independent decision-making than she had realized. She found ways to honor William's presence in their family life even while he was absent, sharing his opinions and values with the children, and including him in important discussions through their limited communication opportunities. The children also began to adapt to their new normal. Prince George stepped into his role as the eldest child with remarkable maturity, helping his mother with his younger siblings and taking on small responsibilities around the house. Princess Charlotte channeled her emotions into creative projects, writing letters and drawing pictures to send to her father. Little Prince Louis gradually adjusted to the routine of missing his father, while still maintaining a connection through photographs, recorded messages and bedtime stories that Catherine told about William's adventures in Africa. Through it all, Catherine maintained her public duties and private family responsibilities with a grace that earned admiration from observers around the world. She was proving that love could indeed transcend distance, that families could remain strong even when separated, and that sometimes the most powerful expressions of love were found in quiet acts of faithfulness and strength rather than grand gestures. The photograph of their farewell embrace had become a symbol of enduring love, reproduced in homes and shared online by people who saw in it a representation of their own experiences with love, loss, and separation. It reminded viewers that even in difficult circumstances, love could provide strength and hope for the future. 3 months into William's mission, a major storm disrupted communications for over 2 weeks, leaving Catherine and the children completely cut off from any contact with him. The silence was more frightening than any of the previous challenges they had faced. Catherine found herself checking her phone constantly, hoping for any sign that William was safe and well. During this period of uncertainty, Catherine's strength was tested in ways she hadn't anticipated. The children sensed her worry, despite her efforts to remain calm and positive around them. Prince George asked direct questions about whether his father was in danger, forcing Catherine to be honest about the challenges of William's work, while still providing reassurance and comfort. Princess Charlotte had nightmares during this time, waking up crying and asking for her father. Catherine spent many nights sitting beside her daughter's bed, offering comfort and sharing stories about William's strength and capability. She found herself drawing on reserves of patience and wisdom she hadn't known she possessed. Little Prince Louis regressed slightly in his behavior, becoming more demanding and clingy. Catherine understood that this was his way of processing the stress and uncertainty that filled their household. She adjusted his routine to provide extra comfort while maintaining the structure he needed. The palace staff, who had grown to love and respect Catherine over the years, rallied around the family during this difficult period. They provided extra support and understanding, helping with the children when Catherine needed a moment to compose herself or handle her royal duties. When communication was finally restored, the relief was overwhelming. William's voice came through clearly on the phone, tired but safe, explaining that the storm had been severe but that he and his team had weathered it successfully. The projects had actually benefited from the break, giving them time to strengthen relationships with local communities and reassess their approaches. The conversation with the children when William called was emotional and heartwarming. Each child had so much to share with their father, from school achievements to small daily victories. William listened patiently to every detail, asking questions and offering praise and encouragement. His voice carried across the thousands of miles, making him feel present and connected despite the physical distance. During this time, Catherine began to receive invitations to speak at events about maintaining family connections during separation. Organizations supporting military families, international aid workers, and diplomatic families reached out, asking her to share her experiences and insights. Catherine accepted several of these invitations, finding that speaking about her challenges and discoveries was both helpful to others and therapeutic for herself. She talked about the importance of honest communication with children about difficult situations, the value of maintaining routines and traditions even when family members are absent, and the strength that can be found in unexpected places. Her speeches were well received, not because she offered easy solutions, but because she spoke honestly about the difficulties while highlighting the growth and strength that could come from facing challenges together as a family. She emphasized that every family situation was different, but that love and commitment could help people navigate even the most difficult separations. Meanwhile, William's letters and messages began to paint a picture of the profound impact his mission was having on the communities he served. He wrote about clean water systems being installed in villages that had never had reliable access to safe drinking water. He described educational programs that were helping children, particularly girls, gain access to learning opportunities that would change their lives. But his letters also revealed his own personal growth during this challenging time. Being away from his family had given him a new appreciation for the everyday moments he had previously taken for granted. He wrote about missing the simple pleasure of reading bedtime stories, the joy of hearing about the children's daily adventures, and the comfort of Catherine's presence and support. The separation was changing both William and Catherine in ways they hadn't expected. Catherine was discovering her own independence and strength, finding that she could handle complex situations and difficult decisions on her own while still valuing the partnership she shared with William. William was gaining a deeper understanding of his own priorities and values. The physical challenges and emotional isolation of his mission were testing his character in ways that palace life never could. He was learning about resilience, adaptability, and the true meaning of service to others. As the months progressed, their phone conversations became deeper and more meaningful. They talked about their hopes for the future, their growing understanding of themselves and each other, and their appreciation for the family they had built together. The separation was painful, but it was also strengthening their relationship in unexpected ways. The children were also growing and changing during William's absence. Prince George was developing leadership skills and a sense of responsibility that would serve him well in his future role. Princess Charlotte was channeling her emotions into creative pursuits, writing poetry and creating art that expressed her feelings about family, love, and distance. Little Prince Louis was becoming more verbal and expressive, finding new ways to communicate his needs and feelings. Catherine marveled at how resilient children could be, how they could adapt to challenging circumstances while still maintaining their essential joy and curiosity about the world. During this period, Catherine also deepened her own charitable work, focusing particularly on organizations that supported families facing separation due to various circumstances. She visited with military families, met with wives and children of aid workers, and spent time with diplomatic families who understood the challenges of maintaining connections across continents. These interactions enriched Catherine's understanding of her own situation and provided her with practical strategies for maintaining family unity despite physical separation. She learned that many families had developed creative ways to stay connected, from virtual bedtime stories to shared online experiences that helped bridge the gap created by distance. The photograph of their farewell embrace continued to resonate with people around the world. It had been featured in exhibitions about love and family, used in articles about maintaining relationships during difficult times, and shared countless times on social media by people who found inspiration in the image. As Catherine approached the halfway point of William's mission, she felt a quiet pride in what their family had accomplished. They had faced significant challenges with grace and strength. They had maintained their love and connection despite thousands of miles of separation, and they had touched the lives of many other families who were facing similar challenges in their own circumstances. The announcement of William's return date came during a routine phone call that transformed into one of the most joyful conversations Catherine had experienced in months. His mission had been successfully completed ahead of schedule, thanks to the dedication of local teams and the effectiveness of the programs they had implemented together. He would be home in just 2 weeks. Catherine's first instinct was to share the news immediately with the children, but she decided to wait until she could tell them all together during their family dinner. The anticipation of their reactions filled her with excitement as she went about her daily routine, carrying the wonderful secret like a precious gift. When evening came, Catherine gathered the children around their dining table with more ceremony than usual. She could barely contain her smile as she looked at their expectant faces, each child sensing that something important was about to be announced. Prince George was the first to guess, his face lighting up with hope as he asked if the news was about their father. When Catherine confirmed that William would be returning home soon, the room erupted in cheers and celebration. Princess Charlotte jumped up from her chair to hug her mother, while little Prince Louis clapped his hands and laughed with pure joy. The next 2 weeks passed with an energy and excitement that hadn't filled the house since before William's departure. The children wanted to plan special welcomes and prepare surprises for their father's return. They drew pictures, wrote letters, and practiced songs they wanted to perform for him. Catherine found herself planning every detail of William's homecoming, from his favorite meals to the small touches that would make his return feel special and complete. She arranged for the house to be filled with fresh flowers, particularly the roses from the garden where they had shared their final walk before his departure. Palace staff caught the excitement, preparing William's study and personal spaces with the kind of attention and care that reflected their genuine affection for him. Everyone who worked closely with the family understood that this reunion would be emotional and significant, and they wanted everything to be perfect. As the departure date approached, William's final communications from Africa carried a tone of completion and satisfaction. His mission had accomplished everything they had hoped for and more. Clean water systems were operational in several villages. Educational programs were being run by well-trained local teachers. Agricultural projects were providing sustainable food sources for communities that had previously struggled with food security. But more than the practical achievements, William wrote about the relationships he had formed and the lessons he had learned. He had been changed by his experience, humbled by the resilience and generosity of the people he had met, and inspired by their ability to find joy and hope even in difficult circumstances. The day of William's return arrived with the same early morning energy that had marked his departure 6 months earlier. Catherine woke before dawn, too excited to sleep, and found herself going through the same morning routine that had felt so sad and final when William left. This time, however, every action was filled with anticipation and joy. She made coffee for two, set the table for the complete family, and chose her clothes with the same care she had taken on their wedding day. She wanted to look beautiful for William's return, not out of vanity, but as an expression of celebration and welcome. The children were equally excited, dressing in their best clothes and practicing their welcome speeches and songs. They had prepared a banner that read, "Welcome Home," Papa in their own careful handwriting, decorated with drawings of planes, hearts, and African animals. The arrival time had been kept private to ensure a peaceful family reunion without media intrusion. Only close palace staff and security personnel would be present for William's return, allowing the family to have their emotional reunion in relative privacy. Catherine stood in the same courtyard where she had said goodbye 6 months earlier, but everything felt completely different. Where there had been sadness and uncertainty, now there was joy and anticipation. Where there had been tears of farewell, now there were tears of welcome waiting to be shed. When the convoy of vehicles finally appeared through the palace gates, Catherine's heart began to race with excitement. She could see William in the passenger seat of the lead car, and even from a distance, she could see his smile as he caught sight of his family waiting for him. The children could barely contain themselves as the cars came to a stop. Prince George stood tall and proud, ready to greet his father with the maturity he had developed during William's absence. Princess Charlotte clutched the special locket William had given her, eager to show him that she had treasured it every day. Little Prince Louis bounced on his toes, ready to run to his father the moment he emerged from the car. When William stepped out of the vehicle, the first thing Catherine noticed was how the African sun had bronzed his skin and how his eyes seemed to hold new depth and wisdom. But his smile was exactly the same, warm and loving and completely focused on his family. The reunion embrace between William and Catherine was even more emotional than their farewell had been. 6 months of separation, challenges, growth, and love poured into that moment as they held each other in the courtyard where their story had continued, despite the distance between them. This embrace was different from their goodbye. Where the farewell embrace had been filled with uncertainty and sadness, the reunion embrace was filled with joy, relief, and a deeper appreciation for what they meant to each other. They had both grown during their separation, becoming stronger individually while their bond as a couple had actually deepened. The children surrounded them, creating a family huddle that felt complete for the first time in months. William listened to everything they wanted to tell him, admired their artwork and accomplishments, and marveled at how much they had grown and matured during his absence. As photographers captured this reunion from a respectful distance, they documented not just the end of a separation, but the celebration of a love that had proven strong enough to survive distance, time, and challenge. The images would show a family that had been tested and had emerged stronger, more grateful and more connected than ever before. That evening, as they sat together for their first complete family dinner in months, William shared stories from his mission while the children told him about every important moment he had missed. Catherine watched her complete family around the table and felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey they had taken together, even when apart. The farewell embrace that had moved the world had been just the beginning of their story. The reunion embrace represented not just an ending, but a new beginning for a family that had learned that love truly could transcend any distance.